Yep. Yep.
By RFK. Yeah.
It doesn't, glyphosate's not written as an ingredient.
What are you talking
It's a
about?
pesticide.
Oh, well, how do I know?
I'm not gonna lie, I was shocked to see you open a soda for some reason. It just,
It's zero.
I understand that. To change your mind. Help this way some more time.
First, let me know when you're ready. Grab the sign up sheet.
I'm ready. Thank you.
Alright, let's just do it after, but now let's.
What time is it? 6:30? Alright.
Which one is the apple tea? Alright, call to order 6:30. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Proof of giving public notice.
This was,
Okay, all the board members are here. We don't need to vote on virtual participation. Public comments are next. Only Morgan tonight. Go for it.
So I just wanted to, I saw in today's agenda that there's the petition from Lake Country School, and I don't know how you guys are gonna vote or anything, but I would like to propose that you vote no, just because we are not at capacity with our enrollment, and with declining enrollment, I would think that we wanna keep as many kids in the population. And from what I was seeing with the tax records, it looks like Lake Country has about 35% of the acres, and we would have about 65%. So giving up that much, I feel like, is just not something, I mean, I think we should keep it. We should incorporate the new apartments and keep it, so that's all I had.
Thank you. Audit presentation. Is Kayla here?
She's coming in
Oh,
virtually.
virtual, okay.
This is just set up.
And then is that us, Amy?
Yes, hi Brett.
Hi. All right, so it's a little hard for us to hear, so if you have questions, please speak up. For the audit, I don't know, do you want us to share, do you want me to share my screen and then I can kind of go through that presentation as we go, or how do you want to handle that?
If you could, that would be great, Brett.
So I can't. Oh, no, it's my picture, okay. All right, so I think I've got that shared. Hopefully if there's a screen, everybody can see that okay. But so to start off, my name's Brett Hoffmeister. I'm an audit partner with Johnson Block and Company. I've got Kayla Schmidt with me here tonight. She's the senior in charge auditor. Like I said, it is a little hard for us to hear, so at least for me anyway, I might hear. If you have questions, try to pay attention, and just give me a shout, and we can try to answer as best we can. But so just to start off with, I'm going to kind of briefly go over kind of an overview of what we do in an audit, what the opinions and other information we have in the report is, and then Kayla's going to kind of go over some of the financial results. This presentation packet that we've provided, it's got about 12 pages of information on it. We're only going to go through the first couple pages, which is just kind of a high-level summary of the audit results and the financial results. The rest of the pages, if there's any questions on those or the audit report itself, we'd be happy to try to do our best to cover those. But they're just some excerpts from the financial statements, more detailed information. It looks like you've typically got pretty full agendas, so we try to keep our audit side of it brief. But just to start off with, in this audit overview page, so this first part that I'm going to kind of discuss is just kind of the high level. What do we do in an audit? What kind of reports did we issue for the years? So, in an audit for a school district, we're looking at a couple different things. We're looking at your financial statements and giving an opinion on whether the financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. For a lot of our districts as well, we audit 60 districts in the state total across all of our offices. I would say probably half or 50 to 60% of them have what's called a single audit. And that's kind of a second piece where we're looking at more specifically at your federal and state awards. So this first page here kind of goes over the financial statement part of it. I'm going to touch on the single audit as well to start off here. But for the financial statements, so we issue, when you look at a set of financial statements, the first thing you'll see from us is the opinion letter. And that kind of goes over what our opinion on the financial statements, the period we're issuing our opinion on, and then some other general information about an audit. So for this year, we're auditing the June 30, 2024 fiscal year. We issued an unmodified opinion on those financial statements. That was issued back in December, filed everything with DPI by the December 15th deadline. And so when you look at that opinion, you want to see an unmodified opinion on the financials. That's the highest level of assurance we can give in an audit. And so that's another way to say it is a clean opinion. So that means the financial statements are, in our opinion, in accordance with GAAP, those accounting principles. They've got a set of footnotes that go along with it. That's got all the necessary information there. Nothing that would preclude us from issuing that opinion. As far as the single audit goes, when we're looking at those state and federal programs, that's required when you hit a certain level of federal funding. And once you're over $750,000 in federal expenditures, we look at those programs and we select certain programs to test both on the federal and state side. We issue a couple of reports along with that as well that look at your internal controls and then your compliance with major programs. Both of those were, again, clean, no findings either for your internal controls over your financial statements, your internal controls over your compliance, or any compliance issues. So all in all, on that side of things, no real significant issues or areas to report. And then with that, the next kind of information is the financial statement side. I'm going to kind of turn that over to Kayla and let her talk a little bit.
Yep, like Brett said, I was just gonna go over some of the highlights of the financial statements. And your general fund increased, the fund balance increased about $350,000. Totaling, the net assets totaling about $5.2 million. So there's a graph later on in the presentation that kind of shows that the fund balance, general fund balance has been trending upward over the years. And that was mainly due to revenues being over budget. Part of this was you guys had a much higher interest income with higher cash balances and interest rates last year. And then also expenditures finishing under budget. And then just we wanted to point out the long-term obligations. The net pension remained a liability in 2024, and this is determined by the actuarial study in ETF. And then the other remaining long-term liabilities, you guys have compensated absences and then a lease obligation. And there's some detail later on. The lease obligation is just you have one copier lease. And then there's no other long-term debt that you guys have. So we're just pointing out that the general obligation debt limit is there, and obviously there's capacity to borrow. And then I think most of the second page Brett kind of touched on with the single audit and the scope of what we looked at with the audit. But again, then there's statements from the audit report, the budget to actual statements for the general fund and special ed fund. If there's any specific things on that. And then here, like you mentioned, go ahead.
I was going to say, if there's anything specific, that was the highlight. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to. Please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, we'll just kind of flip through this and get on our way if there are any questions after that.
Yep.
No questions so far, keep going.
All right. just that the fund balance, the general fund balance is trending upwards every year, the last few years. The next page shows kind of the breakdown of the fund balance. The non-spendable is just what you guys have in prepaid expenditures at the end of the year. And the restricted is the money left over from the common school fund. And a lot of that other funds balance is restricted for capital projects, from your capital projects fund. Here, just showing a pie graph of the governmental revenues. And again, the most significant for local sources is obviously property taxes. There's a more specific graph on that on the next page. But that has increased from the prior year. And then the most significant revenue from the state sources is the equalization aid. And we have another graph on that showing, I mean, this is directly affected with enrollment, which the district's enrollment has been trending downwards the last few years. Let's see, here's a pie graph of the expenditures. And then just some detail on your long-term obligations and the debt limit.
I think that really covers kind of the highlights there. Kayla, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that was about it.
And like I said, everything was very clean this year. I don't think we had any real significant adjustments through the audit. There were a few things Amy corrected after year end, which that's pretty common with woofer coding and DPI requiring certain amounts to be in different accounts. But otherwise, everything was very clean this year. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, we'll let you get back to the rest of your agenda.
Does anyone have questions? Chris?
Thank you. I have two quick ones. First one is on how we compare. Since you do roughly 60 or so districts, it's two questions. The first one is from a financial strength standpoint, relative to our budget size, how do we compare to other districts?
So as far as that goes, and how you're comparing to other districts, there's a lot of variance in fund balance levels. There's a lot of variance in, financial status. I would say you're one of our stronger districts as far as where your fund balance is in comparison to your budget. Because that's one thing that we look at, one of the biggest things that we look at, I should say, is where this unassigned fund balance is in comparison to your general fund budget. If we were to look at your general fund, and we typically kind of lump it in the special education fund in that too, because any shortfall in that is required to be covered by your general fund through a transfer. But you've got about $14 million in budget expenditures looking at your last fiscal year, plus another, $1.6 million budgeted for transfers out. So that's, just under $16 million in total budget there when we're looking at what your net special education costs would be. So you're in that 30% neighborhood in your unassigned fund balance. That's a very strong position to be in. We see a lot of districts having to do cash flow borrowings, where they've got a short-term note on the books to provide cash flow while those tax collections are coming in, and that's because you get your settlements throughout the year. The district has a line of credit that they've occasionally dipped into over the last few years, but nothing that's been on the books at the end of the year. I think that's been zero as far back as I can remember. So that 30%, that 25 to 30% in unassigned fund balance is a very strong position to be in. We generally recommend that be about 20% as kind of a target goal. See kind of that target that we typically would like to see from an audit perspective. And that, gives you flexibility in having to deal with financial issues or unexpected things that come up. In the short term, say you have to borrow for something, you've got some cash flow on hand, or cash on hand to be able to cover cash flow if needed. So, very good position there.
Thank you. And then this is a quick comment before my last question, and it's gonna require Amy to confirm, but so if someone from the listening or watching the meeting, when you look at our fund balance and you see that it's up over $5 million, you think, boy, wow, the school is so strong, look at all that money. But confirm for me when the next time is we receive money.
No.
Exactly.
We
The
just
laughter
got
should
some,
tell you.
yeah. We just received tax payments in January, so we go August to January before we receive large sums of money.
So it's a long time. So for anyone listening, the strong fund balance helps protect us from going into loan situations where we have to encounter interest payments. So having that strong balance allows us to get through the times of famine where a school district is not receiving money. So just because you see a strong, healthy balance doesn't mean the district has all the money it needs. It just means they're being very fiscally responsible with what's already there. Again, because we don't have regular income. So that's just something for people that maybe aren't as familiar with school funding. My second question is more so on the record keeping side. I think it's our duty as a board to ask, is there anything in our recording, our documents, or in the information we're providing you for the audit that we need to do better or that you're missing?
I generally would say no. We ask for information. Amy is very quick to provide it to us, or point us in the direction of if there's payroll information we need to get to working with your payroll staff, AEP information. We have a lot of access to that just through Skyward. No, everyone at the district is very cognizant of the audit and making sure there's good documentation, good procedures are followed. So at this point, we don't really have any recommendations as far as changes or tweaks that would need to be made. And like I said, everything has gone smoothly between the regular financial statement audit and the single audit, because they are, we're asking for different types of information, but we're looking at that compliance stuff too, and we've never really had, we haven't had significant issues there, I don't think, really, since we've been working with the district as the auditor. I think this is about our 6th year now as the district's auditor, so everything's always been worked well there. We've always had good relationships with your business office staff.
Great, thank you. And just a public thank you to the administration for doing such a good job. As you've seen in the news with other districts, that's not always the case. And I also want to thank our auditors, because again, that reassurance to the board, that's what we're here for, is to watch, verify, and maintain these good financial decisions and balances. So I just wanted to thank the administration and thank the auditors for providing the information to the board.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
guys.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right.
Yeah. Hopefully it's quieter now.
Okay, we're moving on to committee reports. Matt has the finance committee report.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk a little longer tonight, because we're also gonna talk a little bit about our transportation plan. We had our finance meeting here in the last week or so. We continue to be in good shape financially. We're about 7 months through our fiscal year. Our expenses are in line with budget, and similar to what I mentioned last year, they're only $150,000 higher than they were last year to date, so very good with the increased healthcare costs and other things. There were no major capital improvements this month, just general maintenance. It's the second month we haven't had any major capital improvements, but we did talk about other things that are upcoming, so just on our radar, some improvements that are coming at North Elementary. We're gonna replace the rubber mulch on the playground. On South, there's gonna be some additional carpeting put in rooms. There's some door replacements that need to happen, and we're replacing the gym floor similar to what we did at North last year. And at the middle school, we continue to redo bathroom floors. So again, all this kind of general maintenance is happening under our general budget without kind of pulling from our capital fund. So that was kind of the general finance meeting. Any questions? Okay, then we spent a lot of time talking about our transportation plan for next year. Part of that was driven by our need to finalize it. It also partially was driven by the incident that happened over the last month. So starting with that incident first, I mean, Tina put out a communication there, but within the week of that incident happening, Chris Haglund, myself, Tina and Amy met with Dousman. We thought the meeting was productive. We went in pretty good detail about Dousman's safety protocols, what they go through every day before drivers get on the road. We went through the training they get, we went through their employee vetting, we went through their background check process. So we heard good things about what they were doing there. We went through that in pretty good detail with them. We discussed with them kind of the need to improve communication and coordination between our two teams regarding incidents and behaviors. As Tina mentioned this earlier, we see the bus as an extension of the classroom. It's kind of the first thing the kids see in the morning, last things they see before they leave. Stuff happens there and they don't tell us about it. We can't help correct it. We can't fit it into our behavior plan. Similarly, if we have issues and don't communicate it to them, they can't make improvements on their end. So we talked about a better way to improving maybe the communication between our teams. There's some stuff that's been in place to kind of have that communication, and it may have kind of fallen off a little bit over the last year, gotten lax as some of these things do. Obviously with an incident, we need to improve upon some of that. Anything else to add on the incident?
I would just say the things they said they did improve. One of the things on our end is we are going to continue to hold it to that. It's not just a thing we can say. We're going to continue to follow up, and that's where these plans are continuing to come into place. So they did have good things to say. We want to make sure that we're holding to that.
Okay, so then we discussed with them some options for some potential changes and improvements to their service next year. As everybody knows, we have a transportation plan we're undergoing. I know people have been waiting for it, so here's kind of what the next steps are going to be on that. Within the next 2-3 weeks, the plan is to send out a survey to all the parents in the district. It'll be an electronic survey, so every parent will get that, an opportunity to provide feedback. We are going to provide some options on, I don't know if it's 2 or 3, we're working on it, for what our plan could look like next year. And then after that, we get that feedback, we'll bring that back in, and we're gonna have one kind of final community forum to have people come in and actually maybe elaborate on where they have thoughts on the options that were laid out. A couple of big goals or issues we're trying to address with the revised plan. And a lot of this is with safety and security, and some of it's scheduling and other things. So, we'd like to eliminate the transferring of students here at North Shore. I came in, Tiffany came in. I'm not usually here during drop off the day after the incident. It is kind of hectic out there. It's crazy, and that's exactly what happened at the Sussex School District where a kid was killed. As a safety manner, after that, we have asked Dousman to turn off the buses when kids are switching between buses. So there's no opportunity for the bus to inadvertently move forward and have an accident. But we'd like to eliminate it entirely. We'd like to, revisit this kind of 2-mile radius of areas that aren't deemed hazardous, but we think are dangerous. So how can we better service those communities? What are we gonna do? Some of that includes students crossing here in front of KE, in front of North Shore. We also have a lot of students that are around the railroad crossing here in Hartland. Both of those areas have been deemed not hazardous. But they're dangerous. I don't think anybody wants young kids crossing in those areas. With those challenges, we have challenges getting crossing guards. Crossing guards would help, right? But we have challenges getting that. What can we do to kind of help with that? We'd prefer to have middle schoolers on their own bus. We'd prefer, I didn't realize this, there's a tier system. We're in what's Arrowhead Heartland Transportation Cooperative or something like that. Basically all the feeder schools in Arrowhead, and there are tiers. We are tier 3 or tier C, which means we are kind of last in line after they do all the buses. So Arrowhead and somebody else is first, some of the other feeder schools, and then we're last. We've talked with them about moving up in the tier process to do that. And so we talked about some options with Dousman of how we could address some of these issues, given kind of the fleet size and where we sit in the tier system. And so I think some of those discussions will come out in this survey. One thing we as a board and we'll have to consider as we get those kind of thoughts back is kind of take them further as to what the cost is. I think every bus route we add costs about $25,000 to the district. Similarly, if we could remove a bus route, save us $25,000. So we're looking at some options there. So the goal is to have that survey out here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, have a community forum in later March, early April, and then from there finalize the 2025-2026 transportation plan ahead of the end of the school year so people can kind of plan appropriately for the next year. So please look for that, and people are watching, please look for that, because we've had a lot of forums on this, and that, I campaigned last year, I got a lot of emails on this thing. But not a lot of people show up to these forums, right? So a lot of people say they want input and they, we don't listen. Fill out the survey, it's coming out, we need you, that's your good opportunity to chime in on some of these. That's it. And did I miss anything? Or, yes.
No, I would just say, when the options come out, just remember the safety is the major factor in there. That's why we want to have the feedback from the public, so.
Yeah, I think I will just add to the conversation that we have contacted engineers. We have continuously contacted Waukesha PD. We have asked them to lower the speed limit. I mean, we have pulled out all of those stops to try to figure out what we can do, and it's roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And so I want to publicly say thank you to both Chris and Matt, having them at the conversation at the table with Dousman, really saying, you know what, let us charge this forward. I just really appreciate that from an administrative perspective, and I think from the community to know that we are all working on this together really is impactful. So thank you for that work on it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Chris, you wanna speak on PPC committee meeting?
Yes. So Niels and I met on the 13th and we went through the 5,000 series policies, which are very thick if I'm reading, as I'm sure you guys saw. Then we also discussed board vacancy policy and the corresponding to-read discussion that had happened in the past. And then the corresponding policy that governs us currently on accepting and adopting new policy. So how the 5,000s went, the 5,000s were distributed to the policy committee early before the November meeting. And prior to our November meeting, Amy Harker-Murray stepped down, but they had been previously reviewed. Unfortunately, they never got a chance to be formally reviewed by the committee because the committee was a committee of one at that point, which was me. So I had conversations with the administration about the policies that we went through, which were significant, but there were a remaining number, which is what we reviewed in our meeting. Maybe 14, you remember how many?
17.
17. So 17 were the ones that did not get reviewed previously by me or shared with Amy Harker-Murray because they were not yet ready. These are significant, a lot of policies that require a lot of reading and updating for current district policy, process, and operations. And there were a handful that didn't quite make it for the November, so those were earmarked for the next one. When Niels and I met, we had went through all the remaining, and Niels also went through all of the other ones. He is an overachiever. And so, which is great, because now that those have all been reviewed with administrative input and direction for what we're currently doing, how we operate. For example, if they're filling the blanks of a person, whether it's the business administrator or the superintendent or the guidance counselor, whatever it might be, those have all been filled in and reviewed to be consistent with existing process and procedures. So that's what'll be coming forward to us in the consent agenda. Okay, that's one. The board vacancy policy was discussed and compared with multiple other districts. And for the most part, many of them followed Neola templates. And there was kind of a choice between two, it seemed like, were the majority. And some described more process as part of the policy. Others were very, very dry and didn't include much for the process. But they still followed two directions. One being that you go through the interview process, and at the end, when the board votes on it, if it's a tie, one direction was the board goes, if it's not defined within 60 days, then the board president selects and it moves on. The other side of the equation was more detailed with the process, i.e. Arrowhead. We talked earlier about Arrowhead alignment as an example, and they detailed their process a little bit more closely and timely. But then at the end, theirs wasn't decided by the president, at least that's the one that we found. It was decided by a coin flip or a random draw. And so we were divided as a committee on what the recommendation would be. So rather than make a committee recommendation, we are bringing that to discussion later as an agenda topic. The last thing we talked about was the reading, quote unquote, requirement of 2 reads before we can adopt policy. And we did do a dive with other districts as well to see if that is a quote unquote rule. And we found that it's not, that no one requires a 2-read policy. It's up to each district, and we did not find a single one that does that. At one point, the board previously had said as a practice that they would do that as we started adopting Neola. But then when we brought all Neola policies active, the existing Neola policy that governs that, which is, oh, that's the vacancy. And the number itself doesn't matter, it's next on the agenda. That one does not require it. It just says that the board, by a simple majority, can determine. So that will also be up for discussion later as an agenda topic. And last thing, sorry, one more thing. The administration also put together a Neola policy review timeline of what's expected and when we plan to have everything reviewed. And as of now, it looks like we will have everything complete by April so that we can get working on student and employee handbooks, have everything ready to rock and roll for this upcoming school year. And then after those are all done, then we can start to look at and pick out anything that we feel like needs more specific attention for our district if there's an opinion on it. Anything else I missed?
Just the one thing to add, you touched on at the very end, and I didn't understand this, but there was a lot of feedback from the community forums about the student handbook. And the primary reason why we're kind of hamstrung as a district and as a board is because we have old policies in place and Neola policies in place. And the student handbook refers to, if it was updated, would refer to both policies, which are constantly being updated and changed. So we talked about updating at least the handbook with that reasoning and explanation, acknowledging that it's not up to date, but a timeline as to when it will be and when it will be current. So it's very transparent with anybody looking at it as to where we're at and where we intend to be and how we're gonna get there. So hopefully improve communication.
And effective this afternoon, that was taken care of, so it's absolutely labeled out on our website. And appreciate that feedback, you know, can't think of everything, all these pictures, so appreciate it.
Otherwise, that was a thorough recap of our meeting.
Awesome,
Routine.
thank you guys. All right, moving on to consent agenda. Items up for approval are 500 series second reading, monthly voucher and purchasing card report, and school board meeting minutes from January 27th.
Can we remove the 5,000 series from consent?
Yep.
Can I ask, are you asking to move all of 5,000 series or just something in 5,000 series?
All of it for now.
Okay.
Alright, I'm making a motion to approve the consent agenda with items C and D minus B.
Second that.
All in favor?
Just approve A, C, and D.
Yes.
And second. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, consent agenda is approved with the removal of the 500 series second reading. So do we want to make that
Can we just talk
on this
about it?
agenda? Yep. Yeah, so let's do that now.
Okay, I guess two things. So I heard what you said there, Chris. So basically, this idea of 2 readings is not a formal policy of ours. It was just something, I remember discussing it, but it's not something that's formally written in. It's just something that we've done in practice.
Correct.
Okay.
What Niels and I talked about with it, and what I'm recommending for people to consider here is that I know that there was some discussion early on about having a 2-read to make sure that everybody had time to go through things, that the public had time. I get it. A lot of these are very much template to stay consistent. We want to get them through. You heard already the reasons why. And they are consistent already with operations and with our previous policies. The checks and balances that already exist for the board with the existing policy and already what we do with Robert's rules is that when policies come to us, if we feel like there's more discussion that needs to happen or additional research, any member can at any time motion to send it back to committee for review. Then all it takes is a simple board majority for that to be effective, which then extends it out further. So at any time with a check and balance, we have the ability to send it back to committee, which again, this isn't necessarily for, but it's that bylaws policy in the next section, 131.1 that we'll be referring to. It doesn't call out that we have to have 2. Our current policy doesn't say it, and there still are safeguards that allow us to do that and send it back. So if there is anything uncertain or unclear, we can send it back. The other thing that was brought up in our conversation was also to give the community time to be able to see and be aware of these things so that they would have an opportunity for public comment. Well, it's posted twice before. You have it at the policy committee meeting, which we had 0 attendees. And then we also have our board meeting, which is another meeting with an opportunity to speak prior to us taking action. So I feel like that's enough for especially general acceptance of policy, but that's my opinion, and I'm only sharing that.
I don't have a problem with that. I was under the impression it was a policy that we had to do, and this isn't a second reading for the whole board.
Right.
I guess my request would be, because I do go through and read them all, I don't like just saying, hey, I just approved a slew of policies that I haven't read, so I do read them. I often have questions.
That's a lot of work, thank you.
But we often have questions and we can't talk to the 3 of you or else it's a quorum and all that sort of stuff. So I would ask when we have these that they don't push them through in consent agenda. We have them outside so we can at least ask questions, because I do have 3 questions I'd like to ask on these. So I'd ask that we do that. I don't care if there's 2 readings. I do think that just is needlessly slow for certain things. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I
thought it
think
was
the
a
only reason
policy.
they were ever thrown in consent, and forgive me for overspeaking, Madam President, is just that if there wasn't anything for discussion, they would just fly through. But at any point, if someone had a question like tonight, you do, any member at any time does not require a second Robert rule, you can pull it up.
No, I get it. I think we had it in consent because we had always had it as a non-consent agenda item maybe a month before, and then it was consent because we already went through it. But I get it. I'm fine with that process. I just have 3 questions. On section 5113, it's on page 22. It talks about busing and transportation. And it says there's 2 options. One's where the board will provide transportation to non-resident students from the resident district. We crossed that off. And we kept, the board will not permit a neighboring district to bus resident students from within its boundaries for attendance at the non-resident neighboring district.
So
What does that mean? Like, we
I asked that exact same question,
It's funny, he did, yes, the same
exact
exact.
thing, same.
So I'll let you answer it.
The first option is we're not gonna bus our student to another district.
which I agree with.
The second option is more performative, to say, we're not gonna let you take our kids. Can't do it. Now, we can't do anything about it.
Okay, I was like, I would like my neighbor to quit driving a noisy car at midnight, but I
Yep,
can't.
no, we can't do anything about it, but it could say, oh, it's our official policy that another district should not come and get our kids and take them away.
Okay. So there's no, I wanna make sure, like, we didn't put this in there and it's like, well, because you guys have this policy, you don't have to pay a certain amount
No.
to people to bus elsewhere, or there's no exposure.
No, I mean, there are people that kind of work through the system, right? They do, and they find a bus stop that they can get on in their neighboring neighborhood, so they can, and we're not gonna police it, but what we are saying is, as a board, we do not allow students to go
That's
to
fine.
different.
I'm good with it, it seemed very strange.
Yes.
It's like, we can't really believe, if somebody drives a bus and a kid gets hard, I can't. It's like,
Good question.
But I just wanna make sure we're not opening ourselves up to having to pay for it because we have this policy.
Yeah.
Okay, the next two are of the same flavor. Section 5350 deals with suicide prevention. And there's a boatload of stuff crossed out, and then what's left is highlighted in yellow, which is different than everything else in here. I just wanna make sure is that something we drafted ourselves?
Yep, so anything that's highlighted in yellow is something that we have created, and it's based on what we currently do. Now, that again is gonna be one that probably comes back to the board at some point down the line, once we're through all of these NEOLA policies, because it's part of our health program, it's part of things that we should be doing. There's a plethora of reasons, and it's on the agenda down the road.
Okay, cause my concern, right, is part of the benefit of moving to Neola is that we get indemnified, so suicide prevention seems like if a kid kills themselves, the school is kind of, somebody might point a finger at the school, and if we've gone away from a policy which we're indemnified on and wrote our own, we're open to exposure that we had, at least for we're always open to exposure that they said, you guys had a crappy environment or whatever, but we're now at exposure also for, you had a policy that you shouldn't have had, it seems. So this gives me some concerns, given that it's suicide.
Sure,
Right?
so we don't just, I didn't just willy-nilly come up with something.
No, I get it.
Right, so we compare with a variety of different districts, and many of the different districts don't wanna, conform to a specific type, which is why that's in there. Certainly, when we go through the Neola Clean, I will ask the question, Matt, and be able to say to you emphatically that isn't going to change the context of what that policy means. And then when I'm able to say that, I will.
Okay, all right, has legal read this or not? I mean, is that?
Legal goes through it once you guys approve it.
Yeah, I mean, we're never gonna divert from Neola without at least checking with our legal.
Right, but that's what I wanted to check
Yeah,
on, so I get it. All right, it was the same thing, the publications had the same thing, I had less risk, less concern about being sued because of that, but it was the same idea, it was all in yellow.
Yep.
So it's all right.
Oh, yep.
Anybody else have questions? I'll make a motion to approve the 5,000 series.
I'll second.
Chris, let me know when you're ready.
I did.
Thank you, ready?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 500 series, second reading is approved. All right, discussion and decision on board seat vacancy policy.
So we looked at this in policy, and Chris did an excellent summary in his report out of our meeting. The vacancy policy, really the biggest gap that we found when we dug into it is the gap of a tiebreaker, right? As a 5-person board, who breaks the tie? Because we don't have anything that breaks a tie other than running the clock out 60 days, and then the board president appoints whoever it is, right? So it is a real a real potential issue with a 5-person board, 1 person's gone, 4-person board, they can't come to a decision. The way that the Arrowhead board resolves this is instead of a 60-day clock, they say if the board, you take, if let's say there's 5 people, you whittle down to the top 2 vote getters on the board, and if the board can't come to a decision, it's done by draw. Our current policy is written that if the board can't come to a decision, or essentially if the position is not filled within 60 days, the board president gets to choose who fills the position. I really like the way that Arrowhead did it. I didn't think the board president's vote should weigh more than any other members of the board's vote. So I know the impetus to look into this was from you, Matt, about any kind of guidance given to the board as to how to make that decision. And no other school board that we found matching policies to gave specific guidance other than what we have down there now per Neola policy. So
I wasn't concerned about the tiebreaker. My thing was to look to the public votes. And so it sounds like you don't find anybody who's done that.
No.
I still think it's a worthwhile thing to put out there. I would suggest some sort of percentage if the, whoever the next person up who didn't get elected, if they got, say 75% of the person who did get elected, you offer it to them. If they say no, you can go to the next one. If they got 75% off, if they say no, you go to the current process. That's what I would prefer to see. Something that looks to votes.
Would you have some kind of time limit from the previous election, like within 6 months, or it's just whatever the last election is going to be?
The most it's going to be is a year. Because a seat is up for election every year. If somebody runs unopposed, then you go right to the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
There might be an exception to that. For everyone listening, don't fact check me, I'm not 100% sure, but I thought there's a statute that after a particular date in November, the position remains open until the next election.
Yeah, you're correct.
So that's fine, but that means then, if this is always April election, farthest we'd ever be is whatever that
8
is, 8
months or
months.
7 months.
So, look, I think for publicly elected positions, if a sizable, that's why I would put some percentage. I wouldn't want somebody who got 30 votes to then say, well, we gotta give Joe Schmo 30 because he got 30 votes in the community. But if each of the last 2 elections, the next highest vote getter has been super close. Yours was 2 votes. Neil's was off by 100 votes. Like in the last one, the 2 people who didn't get elected, Neil's and Lee, all would fit within that 75%. So that would be my suggestion of adding something like that.
My just personal opinion of the policies, I think it opens it up for opportunity for anybody in there. I think you learn a lot about candidates as well during the process, and the interview process is there. And I think it also is in alignment with Neola, and there was no one else there doing it. I don't think it's a broken process. I think it may take some time to find the right candidate, which is, I think sometimes good. There's no rash decisions made there. I think that the policy should stay the same.
I think there is room to game the system. I mean, the system was gamed when Chris got appointed. I mean, John Harder didn't wake up the day after the election and figure out he didn't live in his dad's basement, right? He quit the day after the election, so that seat couldn't go up for vote. So I think there is room for gaming the system.
Maybe.
You think it's just coincidence he quit the day after the vote?
Did you ask him? I'm not saying it doesn't look that way, but to say that it's rigged, that's.
I'm saying it's rigged. I'm saying it was a strategic decision to then appoint.
It could have been for him.
But even then, we had open people who applied. I learned a lot about the community, people who were applying for that position. So I thought it was still informative for all those things over there. I don't know if there's any nefarious there, but I think the policy is set up to have that open input and have people come in and apply for it.
I don't personally like the vote thing at all. It's not something that anyone else does. And really, when you have a situation like this, it was so let's take, for example, the last appointment, it was the fourth vote getter then that was on. That means the majority of people voted for 3 different candidates who might have 3 very different personalities and approaches to government, and which means the greater portion of the community is trusting those individuals to make decisions. So then to just appoint based on a lower number doesn't make sense to me. I think part of the purpose of being elected is that you're the voice of the greater community. And that at any time, if you're not representing the community will replace you. So I'm not a fan of any kind of percentage. My only suggestion would be a hybrid between our current and Arrowhead. The only downside about our current version of Neola, which is a template, is that after 60 days, which can be a long time, it can either sit vacant or be appointed. What I like about Arrowheads is that it's more timely, and it forces an earlier decision to fill and get public participation and an effective board moving. So my suggestion would be to take the process that's identified in Arrowhead, but then leave the tiebreaker still to the president. Because when a board selects an executive team and an executive officer, that person is meant to lead the team. And so if there does come an opportunity for a break, then that person would have the general confidence of the board to make a tie break. So that would be my only suggestion if we were to change the one that we have. I absolutely do not like the idea of a coin flip. I don't think that that's the best way to.
No, a coin flip is ridiculous.
So that would be my only suggestion if we were to recommend changing anything, which probably would have to be drafted up and sent back to committee for drafting whatever that is, if we are even actioning to change it. That would be my suggestion, just my opinion.
Anybody else have an opinion? You two sound like you're against the vote. I haven't heard from Tiffany and Niels about the vote count.
Honestly, I see it from both sides, I really do, I see both thought processes. And I do think there's something to be said for someone who chooses to run and campaign and go through the process. It says something about their drive and their want to be part of the board. But I also think allowing other people to throw their name in the hat, I think often when there is a vacancy that comes open, it inspires people to become brave, to step up, that may not have thought to run also. So to kind of dismiss that isn't fair either. So I am truly torn. And the fact that there is like no other policies around that do this lends me to say, let's not do that. I mean, it still comes down to a board vote, you know? I mean, I know there's the concern about the potential tie, but being on this board three years now, I've never had a tie with anything.
We have had this situation come up twice in the last 2 years of a board member resigning and the community being divided as to how that person should be replaced. I think that sends a message about a desire for some kind of guidance to do things consistently. And it's unknown what would have happened when I was appointed, because I was the only one that offered to be appointed, or that ended up submitting my name to be appointed, so there was no opportunity, or I guess whatever else you wanna call it, to go one way or the other. I think it does take a lot to campaign to run for school board, especially in today's day and age. And we talk about the will of the voters, and the voters speak every election. I think it would be hard to draft language to reflect what I would want to do as to take the last election results into account. There's a lot of numbers and percentages and a lot of that kind of stuff, so I think it'd be an effort to try and draft a policy that would say that. I think it should be taken into account at the right threshold. But I still stand by, I don't know if I could vote on that replacement policy because I was appointed by a non-existent policy.
And we received a lot of emails on both sides of the initial candidates who put their name in for the appointment. And at least my response was always the vote count is a consideration, but I don't think it's the only consideration. It does exactly what Neil said and exactly what Tiffany and Matt said. Yeah, there's something to it. If you're willing to put your name out there and run and spend the time doing it, it shows a committed interest. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the best fit for the board in the district as well. And that's where the vote count, I don't feel, is the main determining factor. I think it can help inform a decision. But the goal of the board being elected is that the voice of the people put you there, and they're trusting you to make the key decisions to keep the district moving forward. So I feel like they're putting it in the board's hands to make those decisions. Again, I'm not for any kind of policy that formally calls out a percentage or requirement or preferential treatment for someone who ran.
Okay, any more discussion?
Well, I would like the motion to stay with the current policy. For
142.5.
Thank you, 142.5 vacancies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay?
Motion passes, we're gonna keep the policy. Okay, discussion and decision on policy 131.1, bylaws and policies.
So when we dug into this, and I think Chris, already kind of started the conversation, there's nothing official in our policy or in any comparable policy for 2 reads. We do a review at the policy committee, and then we present whatever changes there are to be at the full board meeting. We are, have our list for saying?
Yeah.
So for our Neola policy review, we are a couple of months away from being done, right? So this timeline for 2 reads or whatever it is for Neola board policies, I feel like almost is a moot point since we're going through all this pain anyways of 2 reads, we're 2 months away from finishing it, whatever. But I do think there's a broader discussion to be had and to consider when we're done with this process, but then decide in the policy committee or elsewhere to actually make a change to our policies outside of this Neola update. And whether what the process is around making those changes. Are those changes proposed just a policy and voted and then considered by the full board one time? Or is there a proposal to the board that the public gets to hear from the policy committee that then can be digested and then voted on a subsequent board meeting? I think when I think about it, and I think about, yes, the public has the opportunity to go to the policy committee meeting, I feel like that's a lot of agendas to keep track of and a lot of things to look at. I feel like the purpose of the policy committee is to do heavy lifting to bring proposals to the board, not for the public to participate in that meeting. There's no further comments for that meeting. So I feel like when we're making changes to our board policies outside of the Neola updating, I think the policy committee should present to the board at one meeting, and then the board should vote on it on a subsequent meeting so the public has a chance to give public comment.
So you're saying 2 readings?
Essentially, yes, I'm saying we should formalize for that kind of policy update, not this Neola stuff, which is dry, but for, hey, we want to change our anti-harassment policy, right? I mean, that's a big policy change, and I feel like the public should hear the discussion of the board and get a chance to at least email us, weigh in, whatever it is.
And I'll stick to what I said earlier, that I still believe there's enough time and open communication, and that if there's disagreement by the majority of the board, that more time is needed, more research, more comparison, or conversation with other districts, or even further conversation with the administration. We have the right to send it back to committee. No different than when Arrowhead went through some changes over the last 2 years with some really heavy policies. Some of those brought to the main meeting, and there was enough consent there to send it back for some additional revision before it came back to the board. But again, that was the board making an active decision to send it back to do something before taking action. So I do not like the idea of hamstringing or handcuffing the board from being able to act if something is more urgent. And where do you put the definition on what's critical and what's not? Is hats and backpacks that needs to be acted on quickly? Is that something that we have to get 2 months of parent involvement for? Or do we trust the fact that we're elected to represent the voice of the community and make an informed decision? And if we feel like we can't make an informed decision or don't know the sentiment of the public, then we send it back to committee to gather more information, have conversations, and give them more time. I mean, we still have that ability to do it. And the beautiful thing is any member at any time can motion to do that and send it back to committee.
Do we have to update any board policies to ban hats and backpacks?
No.
Okay. When you say
Yeah,
something simple like that, I don't know if we're hamstringing ourselves by moving fast on a safety issue with this issue. Like, if we're legitimately hamstringing ourselves, I totally get it, but if we have a safety issue, our policies, I feel like, are broad enough to give the administration flexibility and leeway to move urgently on something without rushing the board to update a board policy.
I'm thinking in terms of, think of what we even discussed in the strategic plan as an example, the cyberbullying as an example, and we do have some language and terminology around that. But let's say we had an incident with a student who hurt themselves because of some sort of a cyberbullying. We may need to enact something more quickly to update that policy. And what you're suggesting is putting us in a position where we cannot act. The way the policy is written is we have the flexibility to act, but also the flexibility to not act if we don't have to. And we want additional feedback, or we need additional research, or we want to go into the beautiful search function, thank you very much administration for helping me find it, on how to go through and compare all the other districts that use Neola for comparable policies. We can do that. So I just don't like the idea of handcuffing us to where there's a rule preventing us from moving forward.
I have a question, more directed at you. You've been on the board for 3 years, right?
Hope they can answer it.
Up until this whole Neola thing, how many policy things came to the board where you guys were addressing changes in policies? Because I don't,
Every meeting, pretty much.
like formal policies that get written down?
I couldn't help answer that too. So I was
Like what?
I was one of the very, very few people that actually sat here and came to most of the committee meetings for policy. Tiffany was one before she got on the board, and maybe one or two other people, and sometimes just me, I'd be the only person. And there was every month policies. This is back when we were on WASB policies, which were more willy-nilly and always changing and always updating and changing for your district and writing and rewriting. I mean, it was really messy, which is one of the reasons why we've gone to Neola, but that was every month. And usually the policy committee would read through, make suggestions, make changes, bring it to the board. If the board didn't have a problem, it would be adopted and they'd move on.
Because I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't be changing policies with a lot of frequency, right? And so I feel like we're going through this now. I wouldn't expect every month to have a meeting and that, but that lends credence. I understand your argument, but also lends credence to Neil's argument where I think if we're having a policy change, it should be something major, right? And that's, the question is, are you moving, are we moving too fast in that world? I do agree, it is, 2 months is a long, school year is 8 months, whatever it is. So 2 months to pass a policy is a long time.
Let me say this. Back in the olden days, when we were using WAS and we were updating, we were out of date on everything. We were missing a ton of stuff and we were doing it like in a medieval way. So that's why, I think that's why we were doing it every month, It wasn't because we were like wanting to change everything.
But to give you guys another example, so as you know, I sit on Arrowhead as well, and they just went through a major Neola update for policy revisions and wording, and it was 80 plus pages of Neola updates. But none of them were truly substantive in the nature of what's being communicated. So it went to committee reviewed it, it'll go to the board, and it'll get voted on at the subsequent meeting. If we put a policy that has something to do with restricting, then you're getting into, okay, well, is it a major change, is it minor? Well, then how do you define major versus minor? And so again, I just feel like there's enough within Robert's rules and existing policy for protections for flexibility in both directions. Whether you want to move it quick, you can. If you feel like there's some hesitation, you can throw it back. Yeah.
Can I just add 2 cents too, is let us not forget that they do their updates based on state statute.
Yeah.
They also update them only to reflect current. And to your point, we, unlike the WASB, the last ones, they were changed and changed and changed to the point that they would have never stood up in legal, right? That was part of our big problem. We would take some of these policies and they'd be like, what is this? If something happened, like, you would be up the creek, right? Like, there's no way this was gonna hold water. And so, to your point, Neola's not gonna make some big recommendation that's, off the wall and rewriting it, because we wouldn't be legally protected. All of their updates, and there's a ton of updates coming, we've gotta get through this first set, but they're all based on law and state statute. So it's not like we're creating it, we're not making it up. And to Chris's last point with the Arrowhead updates, that there were like 80 of them, because Arrowhead's already gotten through it, many other districts are going through those 80 updates. There's a policy within the Neola policy that says administration, if it's not substantive and it's just like grammatical or whatever, like minor changes, has the ability to do that. Now, I think probably for this board, we would take it to committee. Committee would see all the changes that would be like, a couple words here, a couple changes here, bring it to the board and approve them. I think that's an appropriate way to do it. But I even when we were going through some of the writings when I first came here and we were trying to figure out we were writing them ourselves. And we don't have that here, so it with the Neola.
So, just a thought, the Neola policies should not go through 2 reads. I'm totally on board with you, that is unnecessary busy work. Maybe it's something where we could insert language where it says if the board chooses to deviate from Neola policy, that there's a different process for that, right? Because then I feel like that would be something major. There's a risk that, Matt pointed out earlier, Are we still covered by legal, right? That opens up the board, the district, the community to additional risk if we choose to deviate from where our legal protections are. Maybe that could be your line, right? Your line where it's like, if we're choosing as a board to put the community more at risk by deviating from our legal protections, then it should be very transparent and the community's a chance to weigh in at a second board meeting.
I have a question. Okay, so we're protected by Neola, but not if we start changing wording. If we are changing wording because we feel it necessary, we are accessing our legal to ensure we are in compliance with the law. So is that any different than Neola covering us?
That's a great question.
Well, I don't think our attorneys aren't gonna indemnify us for their advice. Neola, if somebody sues us, and we're always at risk in district if we screw something up. I don't wanna overstate these Neola protections. It's really like, your policy's here. So it's not, we discriminate against somebody for something, regardless of what your policy says, you're gonna be in trouble. You can't be like,
Right.
so.
And I hate to say this, but my question comes into the question of ethics. Why would we choose to deviate against what our community would want us to do? I guess that would be my question. I don't think anybody on this board would want, purposefully, ethically want to move away from what the community would want to do. I just question why would that to me, do you understand what I'm saying? Like if we say, okay, if we're gonna deviate from these legal documents that are tied to state statute because we believe that they're wrong and we should go this way, I just wonder what the why is. What would be a situation where that, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly, yeah, and that's where I think the public would also be like, why are we doing this, school board? Let's give some comments.
Well, I think it could be if there's incomplete information, if we wanted to expand on certain things, if certain situations are outdated.
Yeah.
Or, we just went through it not too long ago, if Neola pushes out something that says you should adopt this, and the board says, no, we don't want to, it's not what our community wants.
Yeah.
We can choose to do that. We can choose to do that in one swoop versus dragging it out.
Or you get the opportunity from the community to tell you if they want it or not, instead of the board assuming that they know what the community wants.
They can, but you have to also remember who engages too. There's a large portion of our community that do not watch these, do not show up, and do not engage. Other than voting. And so they trust their elected officials to make the right decision. I'm not saying we do not collect feedback, we certainly do. And everybody on this board has done a great job at replying to the community when they do, which is not something that used to be done years ago. But the whole concept of vote by community for everything, I don't agree with at all. We're elected to make decisions, move and do the right thing.
Right, dictating policy is like one of our most
That's
basic.
policy, curriculum. Policy, curriculum, and district goals.
Okay, so let's get on track here and get moving. So is there any more discussion? Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to direct the policy committee to update the bylaws and policies to include language specific to deviation, to policy updates that deviate from Neola templates.
I got through half that, so
Jesus.
to update the bylaws and policies, and then I lost you. I didn't quite catch it.
Include language directing 2 board meetings to discuss deviations from Neola policies.
I'll read it back so everybody on the board can hear.
Yeah.
Niels Peterson motioned to direct the policy committee to update the bylaws and policies to include language directing 2 board meetings to discuss deviations from Neola policies.
Modify that? That sounded terrible.
We
That
have,
sounds
we,
better. Depends on how particular you would like to be. You could just see if there's a second.
Well, it's directing the policy committee to draft something, so I figured you guys understand that.
We get what you're talking about.
So you either voted up or voted down, and then we'll be done with it.
No second? Okay, motion fails.
I guess, do we need another motion?
Well, I think we need to either,
I'll make a second motion.
okay,
I motion to leave the current policy on bylaws and policies in place as stands.
Just let me read it back to make sure I got it. Neil Peterson motion to leave the current policy 131.1 in place as it stands. That's much better.
Yes,
Just figured I'd reference it.
thank you. Second.
let me know when you're ready, Chris. All in favor?
Aye. Nay.
Okay, motion passes to keep policy bylaws as is. All right, let's move on. Tina's time, district update.
Excellent. Well, first and foremost, there's some board recognition that needs to take place here. We have 3 board members who have achieved certain levels through the WASB system for demonstrating a high level of commitment to Wisconsin public school students by participating in WASB professional development opportunities. The first one was a level 1, and that is to former board member Amy Harker Murray. And we did send her in the mail along with a thank you note and just giving her her award. Second one was Chris Adsit, who actually went to the presentation and dinner, I believe, and conference, and was awarded level 1. And Tiffany Hawley being awarded level 1 and 2 for Regional 11. So thank you for your dedication and time. Okay, all right. Next, if you want to just set your eyes off to the left or right, depending on where you're sitting right now. We have some recent highlights that some of you may have seen on social media, but as I said earlier, we're really working on that positive image. Hey, again, once again, North Shore is a blue school, or a blue ribbon school for 2 areas. And we did a campaign and we sent out a postcard, and we were really hoping to get some donations from this so that we could have a big celebration off-site or to do something, but we're gonna end up doing it in-house, and we're gonna see who we can bring in and have our own celebration with our students and staff. So super excited and super proud of our staff and schools. One of the things that we're really keying in on right now is our professional development, not just academia, but also for our staff, and to ensure that our students are safe and that they know exactly where, what, when, how, and who's on the team and all the things that they need to do. A couple things to just point out in this situation, safety goes well beyond just the care of the individual that is hurting right now. You'll notice all of them have lanyards on. And they're pull-away lanyards, and so all of our staff are required to wear those lanyards these days to ensure that both students know a safe person that they can contact if they're being chased or something happens. It's self-identification. It also allows us as a staff to know if somebody isn't wearing their lanyard that they are not an employee and we should ask them questions. So really great things. Andy, our nurse, is the one that trained all of our staff in all 3 buildings on CPR and safety, so that was very good. And of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't put some girls basketball out there. So doing a great job, playing hard and having a lot of fun. And I believe those are new uniforms. Yes. So brand new uniforms, sponsored by HLEF. So super exciting and really cool. And I know the girls really appreciated that. Library, you'll all remember this great program that we have out there, and the tree, and again, some support through HLEF as well as the district, and just some great work by our North staff. Having a little bit of library fun, dressing up as characters and reading to the students. It's my understanding that the Light Bright board is absolutely a highlight for them. They just really like that creative process, as well as their reading corners and their puppet show. If you missed it, you missed something incredible. As a lifelong musician and musical theater director and performer, Finding Nemo the musical was earlier this year, and it was unlike any elementary music program I have ever seen. I couldn't believe it. The talent, the costumes, just all of it. It was, it just made me so happy to see. It was absolutely a highlight, so bravo, bravo. Another thing that is near and dear to me is our armed services. So we did take out an ad in our Waukesha Freeman. That's the ad in the corner, kind of just making sure that we honor those who served, and that our students did an excellent job with the program, and we're very respectful and sang, and we had the band play, and one of the fellows actually said, "Wow, that band is really good." So super cute. Great moment. Then, of course, who could forget the Touch a Truck? What an exciting time, getting to go out there and see all of them be so excited about the Touch a Truck. If you've not been there before, it's really, really cute. They do such a great job. They give all of the 4Kers a passport, and they have to get all of the stamps from different trucks, and then they go back and they get a prize, which are these mini donuts. An extra special highlight this year was that the weatherman from TMJ4 was there, and he broadcast live for 3 of his sets and had the kids do one of them, and it was adorable, so really fun time. One of the things that we're really working hard on also is trying to make sure that our 2nd graders are ready for 3rd graders, our 5th graders are ready for 6th grade, and our 8th graders are ready to go on to Arrowhead. And so some things that you're seeing here are our 2nd and 3rd grade groups. We brought our 2nd graders up to the 3rd grade classrooms, and our teachers worked together, and our 3rd and 2nd graders shared on some different things that what it takes to be a 3rd grader, so that's pretty exciting. I think I mentioned last time our 5th and 6th grade are working on a 5th grade called 6th grade boot camp for 2 weeks in the month of May, to really transition those 5th graders in the understanding of how to move from classroom to classroom, learning how to stay organized, learning time management, all of the pieces that go into transitioning from 5th grade into 6th grade. And then Arrowhead High School counselors came out and worked with our 8th graders and tried to get them ready for their freshman year. So that's kind of exciting too. And then we recently did a neat little thing. I don't know if you've seen this, and I'm hoping, Chris, that this is gonna work.
I love learning letters. I love math. I love learning. I love workshop. I love books. I love making friends. Love the ABCs. I love my teacher.
Yeah, so bravo to our team for fulfilling that and putting that out there. It's adorable. All the reasons why people should enter into the 4K and 5K. I think that's the last slide. So just a quick update. I think as I mentioned earlier to the board, when we're doing some meta-analytics on our social media, and one of the things that we keep seeing is that faces of kids is what gets the hits, and so as long as you can see our kiddos and the great things that we're doing, that's where it's at. Oh my, I am so sorry. Chris, help me from afar. I mean, I love them, but you know what I mean. So that is where we're at. And then also, yeah, just as a quick reminder, we are always looking for ideas to communicate better. One thing that was brought up earlier as well, and I felt like it was important to state here, the question came about having a 3-tiered approach to communication. And so we have now outlined 3 different levels of what gets communicated, how it gets communicated. It has a template It has a form already ready for our staff and the appropriate people. And then it also has all of the things that might hang us up legally so that our families can learn about it. It did go in front of the Staff Leadership Council. They looked at it and made their adjustments. The admin team, the executive leadership team looked at it, the board has looked at it. The only group that hasn't, and the whole purpose of the group is the Parent Advisory Council. And I'm hoping to get a time where as many of us can meet as possible over the next week or two so we can get that information out there. But it's coming and it'll be very clear and succinct, so that's where we're at.
We're getting there, I swear. Turning it over to Amy Holly, she's our financial manager and assistant superintendent and HR director, but she's gonna go over the monthly finance report.
Thank you. So January is a good month for us, as Chris helped me highlight earlier. We do receive our first tax deposit, which is fantastic. So in Fund 10, some of the revenues we received in January, we received just over 4.2 million for that tax deposit. We did receive our state pupil transportation aid of 11,700. That is based on last year's numbers, but we do get those funds this year. And then we are still earning interest on our savings account. It did drop again a little bit, down 0.15%, but we were able to earn just over 16,000 in interest on that max savings account. The rest is tied to school fees, extracurricular activities and such. As Matt highlighted, our expenses look like they're good and on target at this time for Fund 10, which is always good news. Fund 27, special education, we did receive another special ed aid payment of over just 100,000. We did have some of our Medicaid reimbursement coming through for over 15,000. And then there's that interfund transfer from Fund 10 to 27 of just 91,000. Again, our expenses look like they're on track and on budget for this time of year. Fund 46 is our capital improvement account. Interest on the account is the only thing that we have as far as activities, and that was about 6,600. Fund 50 is our food service. We did receive some of our federal funds. We had breakfast aid come in at about 1,200 and lunch aid just over 10,000. Otherwise, deposits made or from students and families. And then Fund 80 is that community service, our Lakeside Academy. Just a general note, she did do a rate increase effective January 1st, which she's done for the last couple of years. So we will see that daycare revenue go up a little bit each month now. And she's about on track. She's just slightly over, but we expect that to come down now that she's done her revenue increase. Are there any questions at this time on the financials?
No. Thank you. Okay, new business, discussion and decision on approving or denying the resolution ordering reorganization of district boundaries. So I emailed the board earlier, just so you guys know, there is a new development of apartments and townhomes being built over by the Quick Trip there off of 83. Unfortunately for that development company, district boundaries split their development. So part of it is in Lake Country School District, part of it is in our district. Obviously a marketing nightmare for them. So they had petitioned us a couple weeks ago, which meant they wanted us to turn our area over to the Lake Country School, which means ultimately we lose potential enrollment, which means we lose potential funding. I met with John Ford, he's the creative design officer, and we had a very good long meeting. Essentially, their management company that they hired to manage the property is the one who did the due diligence on the districts. So I enlightened him as to why that was the wrong choice and why we would love to have not only the territory that's in our boundary, but all of the territory if possible. So I spoke to our scorecard rankings, our Blue Ribbon Award, pretty much everything that we have to offer, we talked about. I toured him around the middle school, talked a lot about our future plans with our strategic plan, our future growth with all the land that we have, and then I spoke to really the predicament that Lake Country's in, and that is they are going to referendum in April. And they're going to referendum for an amount that is not even the full amount that they need to operate efficiently. So, there is obviously some unstableness there, I guess. So, I did say to him that if people thought they were going to the Lake Country District and then suddenly there was no Lake Country District, that would not be a good look. But truly, I just spoke our district up, and although I am only one person and I don't represent the board, I gave him my opinion, and that would be that I would not be voting for us to give our stuff up. And I alluded to the fact that if I had to guess, that probably was going to be how the rest of the board felt. I received a phone call from him today, this afternoon, saying they are rescinding the petition. They want to take time to get to know both districts in a more thorough way. They are going to start leasing in June, and it will be a split district, and I think they really want to kind of see, as they gain tenants, where these tenants want to go to school. So his thought process is that maybe it will remain split, and or there will be a new petition next February. Who it will be petitioned to, I don't know, but I think we made a good impact, and for now, we at least get the territory that is in our boundary, and that is, it's a 267 unit development. We have 192 units in our boundary, 81 bedrooms, 82 bedrooms, and 32 3-bedrooms. So, they say they're targeting retirees and then like mid-30s. So I know Amy did some rough math for us and was kind of estimating around like 40 students, which is like close to $500,000 in funding. They thought that was a gross overestimate. They're thinking more like 5 to 15 students. So it'll be really interesting to see what ends up playing out this year. So that is the update on that. So there will be no vote tonight on that.
That's a question. I know we're not voting. If we had voted and said, yes, you can go to Lake Country, obviously the students would go there. Would we lose them I know we'd lose the head count because the students wouldn't come here, but would then our levy would be divided against,
We would lose
we'd
that.
lose that as well,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
basically keep
Yeah,
we
like literally the
we raise
territory
them.
would not be ours anymore. So
So it's not just where the kids go, it's the text.
correct.
I knew that the tax were the kids, but it's actual.
Yes.
So was that $500,000 the revenue for the pupil count, or was that also estimated property?
That was just looking at the pupil count, and I just took 30% of half, assuming that.
The rest would basically be borne by everybody else who lives here by your taxes going up or theoretically not going down by being diluted more houses. Because we can only raise up to our per pupil cap. It's just how many is that distributed against?
So really, like I said, it was a positive meeting. Everyone was respectful and polite, so I'm glad. I was happy to receive the phone call this afternoon.
Thank you for working hard to say positive things about our district and go to bat on that. That was really good, so appreciate that.
No problem. Okay, moving on to the board president report. So only thing under here is future board or committee action items. Does anyone have anything?
No.
All right, flying through now. Okay, PPC meeting.
You wanna look at the first week of March?
Yes.
Should we look for the same time again on Thursday? Or we could do it, well, wait a minute, I wanna be respectful of the administration's time. You prefer not to go home too late, so 4 p.m. for you would be ideal.
Yeah, that's great.
Should be able to make that work. Thursday the 6th.
Thursday the 6th at 4 p.m.
Let me tell you, let me just take a look real quick, make sure I got that. At 4 o'clock, we're good.
Okay, finance committee, you guys good at 9 AM for the 14th?
Yes.
Okay, school board, next school board meeting is March 17th at 6:30. We have a strategic plan workshop prior to that at 5. Everyone good with that?
5:45.
We're switching to 5:45?
Yes, please.
Which I'm actually strong.
No, that's the toxic.
Dye free.
Oh, I don't think there's one real ingredient in those.
Dairy.
Oh,
That's great.
I doubt it. Okay, we are headed into executive session, so you guys are. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
There are no decisions in closed, so it won't come back with any decisions.
Thank you for coming.
I need this motion.
Yeah, we need some motion. We need to close this meeting. No, we need some motion.
Madam President, motion to move into closed session. To discuss matters of.
Too much
I'll
stuff.
second that. Roll call. Chris?
Get out of here.
Aye.
Niels?
Yes.
Chris? Aye.
Yes.
Okay, we're closed
Yes.
at 8:06.
Hang on for just 1 second. I
Tiffany,
gotta check
did you
this out.
second it? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.